Welcome to tonight's workshop. We're so glad to have you here. I'm Summer Powell, volunteer in Alumni Vista with Communities and Schools of Mid-America. This is our first annual graduation camp with Alumni Allies Network, a program within CIS of Mid-America. This workshop is titled Debunking Professor Myths. I just want to start by giving some housekeeping rules tonight about the workshop. This workshop will be recorded and where we can share with other students who cannot attend tonight. We will be recording. So if you are muted, please keep yourself muted if you want to, or if you have any questions at any time, unmute yourself. We also just want to create a safe space for everyone tonight, and we are so glad to have our speakers tonight. I would like to introduce our speakers, which is Dr. Melissa Holder and Mr. Phillip Cody Marshall. So if you want to introduce yourselves, you are free to. They are from Haskell Indian Nations University. If you want to say more about yourselves, you're free to.
I'll let Dr. Holder go first.
Okay.
Such a gentleman, thank you. I'm Melissa Holder, I go by Missy. I am a citizen of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, but I'm also a descendant of the Sac and Fox tribe of Missouri and Nebraska, which is located in Nebraska. Sorry, I just got my tribe totally wrong, but well, that's okay. And then I'm also Mexican American. So I am a graduate of Haskell Indian Nations University. So I attended there and then transferred to the University of Kansas, where I earned both my bachelor's and master's in social work, and then started teaching at Haskell Indian Nations University as a faculty member, and I oversee the social work program, but I also teach the social work focused AIS, which is Indigenous and American Indian Studies courses. Eventually I earned my PhD in social work from the University of Kansas as well. And my focus for that is looking at intimate partner violence and the impacts of historical trauma on Indigenous women. So thank you for the invitation, Summer.
Yes, thank you for having me as well. So my name is Phillip Cody Marshall. I have been at Haskell for almost about 8 years now. I'm enrolled in the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, which is located in Arizona. I'm also a descendant of the Hunkpapa Lakota from South Dakota, North Dakota. And my specific areas that I teach in Indigenous and American Indian Studies is history. So I teach Indigenous history courses, I teach US history courses, and I also teach environmental justice courses as well. So focusing on issues of or topics of traditional ecological knowledge and environmental protection, things of that sort. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. Well, I have some 4 questions that I would like to ask you. So our first question, whoever would like to go first, what is the biggest myth, in your opinion, high school teachers tell their students about college professors?
I'll go ahead and go first. I'm not quite sure, it's been a while since I've been out of high school, but I do have 2 recent graduates, and I guess maybe some of the things that they were getting from their instructors at, while in high school is that professors would be cold and rigid, and that their expectations are going to be very demanding, and that they're not going to work with you. It's the real world. So that's kind of my perception that I gained and learned from my own 2 children, my 2 older ones.
Yeah, I think that was probably the same thing I had heard as well. It was pretty much almost kind of point for point about professors when I was in high school, was them kind of, having these high expectations for the students, and that that they weren't going to kind of hold your hand and they weren't going to assist you along the way. And I'm a product of community college, and I went to State University, and I went to also private universities as well. So I've kind of seen all of these different things. And then of course, working at Haskell as well, I've seen different types of professors in all different environments. And the one kind of conclusion that I came to is, being at Haskell, everybody is pretty supportive of the students, and they really try to assist the students every step of the way through. But at these other institutions that I've been at as an undergrad, I definitely ran into a couple of professors who were pretty cold, and they really didn't have any interest in, kind of helping you with any questions you might have. So those individuals are definitely out there, but not necessarily across the board, though. I think you'll find in all of these different places there are going to be people who are willing to kind of help you through, I think. But it definitely made me feel a lot better about being at Haskell, just because it's kind of one of our things that we shine with as our university.
I agree. Both Dr. Holder and Mr. Marshall, you guys were very opening. In my opinion, you very much helped me in succeeding throughout Haskell. So I applaud you on that, and I thank you. And my next question is, what are a few expectations you all have for students?
I'm looking at Cody. I don't know if he's looking at me or not.
Yeah, I can go first on this one. So there's a few things for sure that it would be nice if students came in and were kind of a little bit more prepared and ready to do. But I also understand that college is kind of a growing experience as well. So you're not just simply getting your education, but you're also kind of learning to become sort of professional at the same time. And so one of the things that I had kind of jotted down on my list of notes here for this question was, email etiquette is kind of I think a big thing for me, and I'm a bit of a stickler for it. And so it's a way of kind of representing yourself in text, and if you're reaching out to somebody that you've never contacted before, how that email is kind of constructed, and if you are including the right information, if you're kind of following the normal professional rules of correspondence, with like some kind of a greeting at the beginning, and then like a structured email, and then a a kind of signature sign off at the end. That sounds all very basic, but what I've really noticed in the last few years especially is that I'm starting to see a lot more people, not just people out of high school, but people kind of across the board treating email as a type of text message, and that's not really a useful way of using that particular tool from my point of view. So and since we moved on to an online world like this, when you're communicating through email, through text of any form, it's really, I think, important to be very clear about what message you're actually sending, to make sure that the point you're trying to make, or the question you're asking, is getting across clearly. It just makes it's so easy to misunderstand things over text. So you want to really try to maybe iron out any of those things by proofreading, and just kind of, it's just good kind of practice for also sending messages and even writing papers and things like that. I don't know does that make sense, exactly what I'm saying here?
I would agree with that, Cody. And I guess I have my notes on the side here, and I guess this follows that same line: to treat me as you would want to be treated. I just think that, basic concept of being and understanding that we are human too. But at the same time, there should be a certain level of professionalism. Case in point, the emails. But at the same time, if you, I'll joke with you, I'll treat you kind, and I expect the same in return for myself. So I think that is important, just to be a good human in that respect. So one of the other things that I had, expectations for students would be to be prepared for class. And and I don't know what that means in the world of younger students, but coming to class to talk about something in the reading or the video that you may have watched. So coming to class and be prepared, because as instructors, we spend time, getting PowerPoints together, finding videos, we put a lot of work into this. So we expect you to come and engage somehow. So that's one of the expectations that I have.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of add in on that too, because that kind of goes along with one of the things I had here too, which was, making sure that you're prepared in terms of like if there's reading that the instructors have assigned, definitely try to complete the reading. That's important. Like Dr. Holder was saying, these classes have been, tirelessly constructed by the faculty member, and they've kind of curated things for the students to where they've put together this PowerPoint, and maybe they've agonized over the different images that they're going to put on it. If you're like me, at least that's what I do. And you've also designed the class in terms of specific readings that you really kind of you took the time way ahead to read those things, make sure they fit into what you're trying to present. And so if you get the class and then nobody's done the reading and you're trying to have a class discussion that you thought was going to be really dynamic and interesting and it was going to be informative for the students, and then you end up kind of almost lecturing the reading because nobody's kind of prepared to engage in that discussion. That's a little frustrating at times, but yeah, I imagine that people were also saying this back whenever Dr. Holder and I were in our undergrad as well. And I suppose maybe this all plays into the larger concept of time management, which is they were saying this to me when I was in high school, and I did not take that lesson nearly as seriously as I wish that I had. So time management is a huge factor for sure in all of this.
For sure. And I really loved how you were both talking about engaging your students, which leads to the next question. With the new generation, for example, Gen Z, coming into universities and colleges, have you had to change your teaching styles?
I'll go first. I've been teaching since 2006, so however long that's been. And definitely my teaching has changed over time. I don't know if that's because I've become more comfortable, one, with the content or just being in front of the classroom. When I mentioned earlier, we are humans as well. And they say, that public speaking is the number 1 fear, right? Well, I'm pretty quiet for the most part. And I feel like I'm an introvert, although people tell me otherwise. Maybe it's just, I'm comfortable with you. But when I first started teaching, I used to do lectures, and that was so difficult for me. And that's when we had chalkboards, and I would write like almost every single note on the board. But now that I've become more comfortable, understanding technology, the benefit of having 2 children who are college age, so that helps me in understanding, like, what do they want to see? What helps them understand, the content? Sometimes I'll craft, an email to my students. I was like, does this make sense? Does this cover everything? And then, my daughter will be like, no, what about this? Or, so it's really helpful for me to bounce those ideas off of them. Some of the things that I've done to, I guess, combat what Cody was mentioning earlier, as far as students not being engaged, I put the work back on them and I have them do some group work. And, start looking at, different questions, different content. So, but it's more social work related. I don't know how in the history focused courses you can have so much group work that we do in social work, where you're talking about the different problems. So adding more of that group discussion. Also, I have adding more memes, right? One of our colleagues, Michael Stewart, likes to add memes in his PowerPoints. And I guess, if you know him, he adds memes to his PowerPoints and stuff like that. So I think that's helpful to see what our colleagues are doing. One of the other classes that I just created or developed was SW 215, Basic Research in Social Work. I may have the title wrong, but what I really have tried to do in that class is engage the students and have them look at what did research look like prior to contact, prior to colonization. And I have them look at what did their tribal nation do to maybe follow waterways, or how did they follow star knowledge. So I really have them engage in that respect and looking and talking to elders. And that's some of the things that I really, want them to do, because if they've attended a mainstream institution, those kinds of things probably weren't as valued as they are at Haskell. So those are things that I really try to encourage our students to do, is, talking to their elders, looking at what was done prior to contact with or colonization, or this whole formal concept of education. So those are some of the ways that I try to do. I changed my teaching style.
Yeah, and it's kind of a similar answer to Dr. Holder, is that as time has gone on, I think I'm maybe like 12, 13 years into teaching at this point in time. My teaching style has definitely changed. And what I've really kind of realized is you have to adapt to sort of a little bit to like kind of the new generation that's coming in and kind of their expectations and how they're absorbing information. But also, like what I kind of realized over time is that you just have to teach your classes differently too, kind of what Dr. Holder was getting at. So for some of my lower level classes, kind of 100, 200 level classes, I spend more time lecturing, putting information out there. For the upper level classes, I spend more time engaging the class in class discussions, because at that point, students, as they get to be into their maybe junior, senior years, they're more comfortable with speaking. They maybe understand their cohorts that they've been in other classes with, so they're just more comfortable in that way, and they're a lot more expressive about some of their ideas and opinions. And really, and just kind of like what Dr. Holder was saying, I could get up there and lecture all day long about an idea or a topic, but after a while, my life experience is pretty limited compared to the vast life experiences of the students in class with me. So especially and at Haskell specifically, because you have so many students from so many different tribal backgrounds that they're all going to have their own kind of cultural relevancy to bring to the table and to share with other people. So there have been some classes where I think I actually ended up learning more from the students than I actually taught them in the course of the class. So but yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna adapt my classes to kind of the new generation, I don't think I'll be jumping on TikTok anytime soon to kind of like make some quick history points or something like that. But one of the nice things about history is that even though you're teaching about the past, history is always happening, and it's the gift that keeps on giving, and it's pretty easy to bring up current issues that are going on in regards to things in the past as a kind of a contemporary example of why those things in the past are important, and you should understand how they played out to understand how things could potentially play out today. And the recent, last maybe, 3 months to 4 years or so have kind of showed a lot of examples that we can learn from history. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. So my next question is, what is one tip or advice you would give to new students, especially our first generation students?
I don't know if it's one tip, but so if they're first generation students, if you don't know, find someone who you're comfortable with, whether that's an upper level student or someone who just seems to have that grasp of college. Make that person your friend and ask them the questions. If a teacher's using an acronym, or I don't know the difference between the semester GPA versus the cumulative GPA, ask the questions. Don't be afraid, even if you put it in an email format. And if you still don't understand that, continue to ask, because I think not all of us have been fortunate to have someone to lead that way. I was first generation, so there was a lot of things that I did not know. But through my mentors, through my advisors, I was able to begin and understand that the academy and what are they talking about. So I think it's important not only for you to start building that relationship, but later on down the line, you're going to need a faculty member to come onto your webinar or write you a letter of recommendation. So starting to build those relationships, you don't know how far in the future that's going to benefit you. So I guess that's one thing that I would recommend is just ask, no matter, I have students who will email and say, I'm sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. That's my job. So ask me what you need to ask.
Well, I mean, and kind of right along those same lines is make sure that you don't isolate yourself. I'm also a first generation student in my family, and my my first semester in college was a very prototypical kind of like crash and burn semester. It was not a good time, and that was kind of on a number of different levels. And so rather than kind of reach out for assistance or help, I ended up kind of isolating myself just because I kind of felt like, oh, this is my fault. I'm not understanding what's going on, and no one can really help me, basically. But no, in reality, if I had just been a little bit more kind of forgiving of myself and actually, reached out to the instructors a little bit more and kind of tried to get their assistance, that would have probably gone a long way. And I think it can be very easy for students to kind of feel like, oh, well, this isn't going well, and I missed one assignment, so it's all over. And that's just not the case. If you make contact with the teacher and try to find out where you stand in the class, just like Dr. Holder was saying, like, yeah, just email us and ask us. We're not going to be mad at you, and we're not going to hate you or anything like that. No, I do have that kind of memory from being young and thinking, oh, they probably just really don't like me, and it's like, no, I'm sure that wasn't the case at all. So definitely just reach out and and I think it's great advice to try to connect with other students who maybe you're a year or two ahead of you, and get their ideas on how they persevered through different problems and got to where they are.
I agree. I think when going to Haskell too, like what both you, Mr. Marshall and Dr. Holder said about finding someone who's older than you, I think that definitely helps, because when I first entered Haskell, that was definitely a challenge, is finding someone who was older to help meet those expectations that the professors did have of me. So for our other guests, do you have any questions to ask our speakers?
I do. So I came from a really small town that had 15 to 20 kids per class, maybe. And then I also went to KU that I had lectures of like 1,000 kids. So what advice would you have for students coming into that kind of situation who are going to a really intimate classroom to this huge, vast class?
Sophie, maybe we went to the same high school. I don't know. One of the things that when I previously did academic advising for first-time freshmen, I would tell them, you can make this campus as big as you want it or as small as you want it, right? Classic advice. So you can make it as big as you want by not getting to know other people, not getting to know your instructors, not getting to know your roommates, not getting to know your college residential assistants. You can isolate yourself, and that's so easy to do. But you can also do the reverse, which I would recommend to these individuals, is making the campus as small as you can by getting involved, whether that's joining clubs. There's tons of clubs at any institution. We have tribal specific clubs. We have, Summer, I think, was it you and Autumn, or maybe just Autumn was in Barbella's. So there's specific interest groups that you can join for these organizations, getting to know your instructors, and just hanging out in those common areas where all the other students are. Not that that should be the focus of your time, because you still need to find that healthy balance, right? To attend class, do your work, but also have that social engagement. So that's one of the things that I would recommend, is getting in and being present.
Yeah, and so the first classes I ever taught were classes of 120 students each, and that was stressful. so I think the experience that students might be having in a class that's of something of that size or larger, they might be having kind of their own strange experience coming from a high school where the classes were fairly small and more intimate in that way. The instructors sometimes are having their own kind of mild crisis be teaching to classes of that size. So but it's funny, I think back to the students I remember from those classes, and I've seen 1,000 students come through my classes since then, and I still remember very specific individuals who either spoke up in class occasionally or talked to me after class about a topic that they were interested in. I still remember their faces and names even today. So I think, just like Dr. Holder's saying, kind of making the experience your own and kind of just not necessarily just letting it wash over you, but actually kind of fully engaging in it in some way or another is going to be probably much more helpful for you. And I think it's actually kind of doing a favor to the instructor as well.
Yes. I have a bonus question. This is my personal question. How has COVID affected your job?
I feel like Dr. Holder and I both took the same deep breath at the same moment of oh, if where should we start? Where's my list of things? Well, I mean, it's kind of this right here is a big part of it. As comfortable as I was teaching in the classroom, I almost feel like I had to get reoriented with the process of teaching in this type of format, because it is very different, and you have kind of like this sound and video delay between what's going on, and if you're trying to have an in-depth discussion about a complex topic, this can be a tricky way to do it for sure. So in my case, and I'm sure that this probably may be true of Dr. Holder and other instructors as well, it's been a bit of a learning curve. And so we've been kind of forced to adapt to certain ways of teaching that I don't think we necessarily, or at least I never necessarily planned on having to adapt to. But overall, I've seen that the students have been pretty adaptable, and I was kind of concerned about their engagement in my classes, and I've been, after a couple of semesters now, I'm actually very pleasantly surprised that I think we've all kind of dealt with our own technological issues, but it hasn't seemed to phase them nearly as much as I think it probably has phased me. So that's I don't know, that's kind of my brief summary of several things, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I would just, with some of those difficulties that have come along, says my internet is unstable, so if I freeze up, just know why. So along with some of those difficulties have these opportunities like this have been presented. So I think, that has also been a positive to this. I've been on several panels recently. So whereas in the normal academic year, I may not be able to do that because I would have to travel somewhere, that would cost the institution money, and, I would have to miss class. Whereas this way I could still, have my class meet, do their work, and then I could just hop online later. So I think as far as that goes, that's another positive.
I have a follow-up question to that. How do you think moving forward, this type of environment will impact your teaching? Do you think you continue to use this type of technology, or, I'll let you answer.
I guess I'll go. So prior to Haskell moving fully online, I taught one of my courses as a hybrid format. So there are some days we would meet in class and some days would be online. And I don't know, that was just what the University of Kansas was doing. So I kind of followed suit with them. So that will always probably be an option for that particular class. And I think now that we've opened this door to online teaching, it's going to stay in some form or fashion. I don't know what direction our university is heading, but I know that we've been throwing around some ideas of what it's going to look like. So yeah, we can't go back to fully in person, but I hope that we have options as instructors.
Yeah, the expression that came to mind was the horses are out of the barn, and we're not going to get them back in at this point. So, but I think the positive side of this is, yes, if we have to like quickly adapt to go back fully online or even do a hybrid type course down the road, it's nice that I think most people are probably well prepared for that now. And also kind of circling back to Dr. Holder's previous point about doing panel sessions and things like this right here, for instance, there were times where I help run a grant during the summertime where we invite people in for these kind of these type of panel sessions for undergraduate students, and there are people we would have never been able to ask before because they were too far out of the region. They wouldn't have been able to come in for it. Those restrictions are all gone, and so we're able to get some very prized individual scholars to be part of these programs and or different events. So that's a huge plus to this.
Okay, sorry. Does anyone have any more questions, or do our speakers, do you have any more advice you would give our students for, interacting with you all as professors?
I don't know necessarily if it is for us as professors, but I guess general advice would be ownership of your education. And right now at Haskell, we're going through pre-enrollment. So what I mean by that is, taking a look at the degree checklist or whatever they call it at your institution, and understanding when classes are offered. Are they just fall classes? Are they just spring classes? So that way, if you don't have the best advisor, you'll know what path you need to follow to get to graduation. Because it's not only the classes that you take, sometimes it could be those credit hours. So taking charge of your own education in that respect, yes, seek out the assistance of your advisor, because they're going to help you along that path. They may know what the prereqs are, they know this class has a lot of reading, this instructor is going to be maybe more demanding of you. So understanding, that from the advisor's perspective, but also I think it's important for the students to know which classes they should take, and not all the fun classes. You should have a healthy mix there.
Yeah, so I would say my very practical advice, I guess, in addition to that, would be read the syllabus for any of your classes. Have the syllabus ready to go. That is, I mean, if people construct their syllabi the way that I do, and I think Dr. Holder does as well, I mean, they're constructed almost like they're almost kind of like a contract between the instructor and the student. This is what I've agreed to do during this class. I'm going to teach these things. These are the assignments I'm going to give out. And your side of that contract is to basically to carry out those things and to hold me accountable. If we're not covering some subject one day, feel free to ask why that's not happening or something. I try to stick to my syllabus pretty closely, but things do get off track occasionally. So being familiar with the syllabus is hugely important. And also, I think probably just being aware that even if you don't have too many direct interactions with the professor in any of your classes, don't assume that they still don't keep track of what you're doing in the class. We're all pretty aware of where you stand in the class, even if we don't necessarily talk to you every class session or anything like that. We're pretty aware of what assignments you've turned in, your attendance, those types of basic things. So even if you kind of feel like you're maybe a little bit invisible in the class, we don't necessarily see it that way.
Well, thank you for your last minute advice to our students, and I'm sure they're going to take this helpful advice. I know I would have definitely loved this advice getting from professors from high school. I thank you for attending this workshop tonight for Debunking Professor Miss. I thank our speakers, Mr. Marshall and Dr. Holder, and I also thank our other guests for attending too as well.